Hypocrisy.
Hey, what's up, guys? Oh my gosh, I'm way off center. Welcome to Law-Splaining the Interwebs. Good Lord. I'm your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota, coming to you live from Florida, however. Once I get this thing worked out. Oh my goodness, how's it going, guys? So, my plan, I'm trying to get these windows arranged on this little laptop. My plan did not work out the way I thought it would. For those who are not in the know, and probably most of you, I was at dinner with Steve Gosney tonight, which was fantastic. But I did not expect it to last 4 hours long. That's what she said. So I do apologize for being late. We had dinner reservations at 9:30, and I thought certainly I'd be able to start. I set it a little later, right? 9:30 Eastern, because in Florida. I set it for 11:30 Central, 12:30 our time, thinking that would be plenty of time. Oh, I was very wrong. Very, very wrong. So again, my apologies for that. I'm trying to get my windows actually set up here so I can, do a show. And it's just a disaster. So that's great. Trying to organize everything. But how are you? I hope you're well. So I can't see your chat yet. I'm almost there. I'm almost at the point where I can actually see chat. Here we go. Pop out chat here. Get this one going. What's up, Camelot? How you doing? Whoo! All right, so I need this chat. Thank you, Zeno, for posting the links. Let me get that done. Anyway, so we do have some topics to cover today. Believe it or not, I know no one will believe me on this, but I did plan on doing a full show. So it's and the other thing, so I was able to update the time on Rumble, and it looked like it was going to be later. YouTube, I could not get the time to update from the phone, so I did I tried to update it on the chat with the pinned post, but no one ever sees that. I guess it's kind of weird, but anyway, so almost done arranging windows. Was it routinely wrong about things concerning time management? Wild guess, ADHD. Well, okay, here's the thing. So I'll tell you very quickly about dinner because, this is part of the problem. Steve Gosney is the problem. It's entirely Steve Gosney's fault. And I think that's the important thing for everybody to remember is that when you want to be mad at me and blame me for anything in the world, the answer is actually, well, it's Steve Gosney's fault. So as tempted as you may be to say, oh yeah, Nick is wrong, it's actually Steve who did it wrong in the first place. But no, so he's been telling me about this restaurant. His favorite restaurant to go to is Burns Steakhouse in Tampa, apparently. So Burns Steakhouse in Tampa, he's been wanting for me to go to the steakhouse for quite some time. I didn't realize what Burns was. Is the mic cutting in and out? I can move it closer. I didn't have time to get it on a boomer arm. Okay. So Burns Steakhouse is like this old-fashioned 1950s steakhouse. You go in, it feels very lobstery type stuff. Not BURNS, BERNS, BERN apostrophe S. So it's it's very old feeling, and it takes forever. It's a place like it's an event, and so you eat down in the main dining areas, and then you go upstairs for dessert, which is like a whole separate room. Yeah, Burns in Tampa, Jared. So it's like a whole separate room upstairs. It's fantastic. It's very good food, but it just took a really, really long time to get everything done. But it was great. And so we had a really great time. Lady Rackets and I met Steve and his wife, and we had good dinner and good company and all of that stuff. But it did take a minute, we'll say. It took a minute to get everything and eaten. And so yeah, the meal was over 4 hours long, all told, which it's like, wow, okay. And then with that, with that, it was also 40 minutes away from my parents' house. So, what did I get for dessert? You like the banana cheese pie? I got the citrus cheesecake, and I got a side scoop of a cookies and cream ice cream. Oh, so good, so good. But and for the steak, I had the 100-day aged Dem- Demarc to something cut. It's basically a ribeye, 100-day aged ribeye. Uh, it was very good as well. Very, very good. Okay, so let's get into this. The topics I have tonight. The topics I have are where the hell is my brain? Yes, the Supreme Court infringing the Second Amendment, and then Trump charges and the procedure threatening the Constitution. So we've got kind of this theme going. Delmonico, that's the steak. Thank you. Um, I've never seen it called a Delmonico cut before, but it was very good. So um, here's the theme, guys. We have an ongoing threat to our Constitution. And I know a lot of people were tempted to say, like Trump or whatever is a threat to the Constitution. It's frustrating to hear because I feel like it stems from a misunderstanding of how the Constitution works, of what it's supposed to do, what it's supposed to guarantee. And they get into this thing where like, oh, the president is going to do something that threatens whatever. And it's actually really difficult for a president to threaten the Constitution at all because the president is infused with the executive authority. It oozes out of every action that he does. And this is something I've been talking about a little bit in the prosecution of Donald Trump. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as we get into it. But I want to start with the story about the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court just did something really fucking irritating in that they took, uh, how do I word this? So the Fifth Circuit had put an injunction on the ATF involving the classification by the ATF of something called ghost guns, which is the quintessentially scary name, I guess, because politicians are spooked by ghost guns or something because they're from beyond the grave. It's the idea of an untraceable gun is a ghost gun. So which covers a whole lot of stuff, but it's not like a special polycarbonate manufactured skin. It can't be detected by metal detectors. It's literally, it just means a gun that's constructed without a serial number, which if you make your own guns, typically don't have to have that put on them. ATF is trying to change that by reading into the definition something that isn't there. And they just say, well, that's the law. And you have to now follow it, even though it's not the law at all, right? It's not in the language of the text. It's not in the meaning of the text. It's not what they meant when they wrote the text. Nothing about it actually exists. He just decided that there's a thing, and it's really difficult to get Congress to do what the ATF wants because there's two parties with different interests and then a whole bunch of constituents. And so if they can't get them to change the law, they just change it themselves. They're an administrative branch of government. They'll just do whatever the fuck they want. And that really is the threat to the Constitution that no one seems to care about. Um, the administrative state wields phenomenal power. It is a it's called often the fourth branch of government, and it are these administrative bodies that are created often by an act of Congress with a rather vague message about what they're supposed to do. And in doing so, they get congressional authority put into them. Congress delegates a task to them. What they're not supposed to be able to delegate, however, is their actual lawmaking ability. That's not what they're able to do. So they create a regulatory body, and its job is to regulate through a legal structure that is set up. That's the way a regulatory body is supposed to work. And I say supposed to in the loosest terms because they're not constitutional either. There's no constitutional authority for Congress to just make random regulatory bodies and have them have lawmaking authority within them. But over time, this has kind of developed. All right. So we get these little miniature tyrannies like the ATF or the FBI or the IRS or whatever that are supposed to carry out congressional actions. And in doing so, they're given this leverage to interpret the law as they want. And the Supreme Court upheld kind of this ability to make law. It's not making law, right? This is the little cute disguise of it is we're not making law, we're interpreting the law that we operate under. Great. Fantastic. So they do this and they just define words in their own way. And the Supreme Court upheld this in a case called Chevron. And you'll hear about Chevron deference if you listen to any of us legal YouTubers for long enough and don't end up blowing your brains out. You'll hear about Chevron deference. And this is a case about Chevron deference in the long run, because what they're doing is saying that these particular guns need to be serialized so they can be tracked, because tracking guns is what the government, yeah, I don't know if you guys remember that. That's in one of the articles of the Constitution, that the government has the right to track every gun that's manufactured and transferred, because that makes sense, right? Like, I think it's in the Second Amendment, right after shall not be infringed except for the purposes of tracking and monitoring every transaction and transportation of a gun within the country. That's written in there. You might see it if you read it like deeply, like super deep. But that's how they're doing this. And the other part of this is if you guys, I say if you guys don't know, you guys probably know way more about this than me. But there is a way to manufacture guns at home where you buy a partially completed or partially started, maybe is a better way to word it, gun. You buy an 80% lower receiver, which is a block of metal that has been partially completed. And then you have to take a machine and you have to complete the rest of it. And then you assemble the gun and go with that. They want that to also be like a tracked thing. They're putting restrictions on the ability to manufacture guns on your own. Because why should you have the freedom? Like, why should you, a useless peasant, have the freedom to manufacture, transfer, and sell guns when there's a government that is very concerned about your ability to possess the thing which might threaten their control over you? I mean, it doesn't, I mean, I don't see why you guys don't understand why this would be a problem, right? Like, you guys don't seem to get it, that the government gets to control everything that you do. And that, again, it's written in the Constitution. And there's nothing in the Constitution at all that says that you should have the ability to have any control over your life, or that you should have the right to possess a gun. I mean, that'd be crazy. Why would you write that down in any governing document at all? If you talk to anybody on the street and you say, hey, does it make sense for a government to write down, like in a document somewhere, that you should have the right to own guns? They'll say, no, that's ridiculous. Why would anyone want to do that ever? And that's kind of becoming the common thought. It blows my mind that, like, people are just under this impression government gets to make these rules, and the converse to them is it's a lunacy, right? Like the idea that people could just, what do you mean someone could just make a gun and like sell it to their neighbor or like just give it to a friend? Like, no, no, that's insane. Why would we let people do that? It's like, well, it's not really about letting people do that. I mean, you have to actively stop people from doing that thing. It's not an allow. You have to disallow. You have to actively stop the thing from happening. Otherwise, it's just natural, as with any other product or service on the planet, right? Like in the absence of law, people buy and sell everything, all the way from, their bodies for labor or sex or whatever, all the way up to other people, right? You just sell slaves. Just, well, where'd you get them? I don't know. Does it matter? Buy them. In the absence of law, that's the natural progression, is to acquire something and then offer it to someone else for something that you want. It's what people do and have always done. So governments don't come in and allow trade, but this is we're the one failing of Western society is that we're conditioning people to believe that government grants us the ability to do things that are normal and natural, rather than government restricts the very few things that we might naturally do that are very detrimental to society. And that framing and this subtle shift in framing how government operates from this thing that is to be like tolerated mildly, uh, as this miniature tyranny with the least amount of infringements, into this incorporated part of our lives where we're a cooperative, happy group of fucking losers just bowing to whatever government tells us. Like how the West has done that so effectively is terrifying and disheartening. And we're like, the sad thing is the US is about the best on it, which means, oh shit, sorry. I'm at my parents' house and they have those little they have those little like one of those little Amazon robots. I think they're called Emo or something. And or maybe it's Apple. And it just started snoring over there. Freaked me the fuck out. But this whole idea that America, like I said, America's like the best at it. We're like the most freedom loving. And yet that's embarrassing. That should bother everybody on earth, that we are the most freedom loving country. But when you think about what it's done to Europe, to Canada, uh, and you look at those countries and their integration with government as part of their lives, licensure for literally everything that you do, and just an acceptance. Well, of course, government would regulate everything that exists. Why wouldn't they? That is one of the most egregious failures of Western civilization when you think about how America started, and with this idea that government was an intolerable thing that must be entertained, but only to the minimum, is where we started. And now we're like, no, no, give me that sweet, sweet government. As long as you'll take my money and hold it and give me a juicy tax return later. It's like, but bro, that was your money. Like they just held it for a fucking year. They just took it from you so you didn't have it. And they gave it back to you. They're like, yeah, but it was a lot. It's like that's because they took a lot. That's because they took a lot of your money. They never mind. Never mind. Just give me my check. Right? Just give me my check. And it's a fantastic thing to watch in a real weird way because the government has so effectively bought us with our money. They bought us with our own stuff. They take it from you and then they give it to you in different ways. And you're like, yeah, actually, that's what I would have spent it on, I guess. And we're all okay with it. We're like, actually, since you gave me some of my stuff back, I mean, not as much as you took, but some of it. And I mean, in ways that I didn't want, but at least I got something. Since you did that, then I guess Well, yeah, you could just do more stuff now. You could just take more of my stuff. Take more of my freedom. Take more of my rights. Tell me more of what I can and can't do. Actually, and take more of my money and then put more officers on the street and like on the sidewalks and stuff to tell me how I'm doing things wrong. And when they tell you how you're doing things wrong, they do it very effectively, of course. Like they come up to you, they ask a bunch of questions that you'd be weirded out if anybody else asked. And then they tell you like you have to be arrested now, and you're like, wait, what does that mean? They're like, well, we're gonna take your arms, we're gonna put you in handcuffs, we put you in this car that you paid for, and then I'm gonna drive to a station that you paid for, and I'm gonna take you out of the car, and I'm gonna bring you into the building, and then I'm gonna fingerprint you and put you on a list and accuse you of something, whether you did it or not. I mean, you can pay for someone to figure out if you actually did it, but I'm going to put you on a list, and then after that, I'm going to put you in a cell where you paid for it, and then you can pay to get out of it, or you can wait. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I want more of that. I want more of those people walking around to tell me what I did. And the funniest thing is, conservatives and Republicans routinely want more of that. They beg for it. They're like, this is such a good idea, actually. You know what we should do? We should actually just we should get more police on the streets, right? Like that'll fix the problem. Ignoring the fact that no matter how many police we've ever put on the streets, no matter how much money we've thrown at these problems, they're always there. They're always persisting. Your life is constricting. Everything you do is getting slightly less and slightly more watched and slightly more monitored. And yet, everything that these criminals do all the time, this crime that we keep hearing about, it just doesn't seem to change and go down. And yet, every single fucking time, you'll hear conservatives and Republicans out there just, yeah, you know what? Just more police will do it. Just more police, because they have been so effectively bought. But see, like having children, you buy one ice cream, but the other one you don't buy ice cream because they don't want ice cream. They want a Rubik's Cube, right? And government has figured this out. I don't know if you guys recognize this, but government has figured out how to purchase each of the main groups. And the best part is they've really narrowed it down to two primary groups of people that they have to buy off, and they're very effective at doing it. And each group is so eager to thank government for that. Like, oh, I'm so glad you put more police. And then conservatives are like weirded out when government flips the script and they're like, oh yeah, all your guns are illegal now. They're like, wait, but that's not what I wanted. When I supported the NRA and the NRA was like, yeah, actually you need more police officers on the street, I was like, yeah, that makes sense because the NRA is protecting my rights, right? No, that's not what was happening. That was you being bought. That was you being shifted into compliance by a patsy organization that is allowed to exist because that's part of the control. That's part of the great thing that that we built here, which is the system to own our lives rather than the system to allow us to live our lives in civil society. That's the distinction that we're supposed to have on government. Is a properly tolerated minimal government is one in which you are living and protected in various activities by a government interested in you creating your own life, versus the maximally invasive government that we keep begging for, which is the one that says, we will tell you what you can do rather than what you can't, because the list is shorter for what you can. And it just gets on my fucking nerves every now and then. Every now and then gets on my nerves. And this is one of those times. So ATF implemented this rule change, definition change, however you want to look at it. And a federal judge actually said, you know what? I don't know if this rule is going to fly. So he stops it. nationwide injunction. Boom, done. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals says, well, it's not a nationwide injunction. It's actually a narrow injunction just on the plaintiffs. So only the plaintiffs don't have to comply with the new rule, but everybody else does. And then Judge Alito gets emergency petitions from the government from the Fifth Circuit, and the government asks them to stop the injunction, even as far as the plaintiffs go. Okay. So when they did that, Alito granted the emergency hearing for the government. And then the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 ruling, struck down the injunction, which means that the ATF's rule stays in place for everybody. So now that rule stays in place as this progresses through the courts. Now, if you're wondering who was the 5-4, right? Because that's the question. Well, it was the 3 liberal justices, right? And then Justice Roberts, so the 4 liberal justices. And then the 5th one was, of course, Amy Coney Barrett. And I have no idea why Amy Coney Barrett or Robert, well, I don't really have any idea why any of the justices would think that this injunction shouldn't stand, because that's all they were deciding. Should the injunction for just the plaintiffs, which is like 2 organizations, should that injunction remain in place? And they're like, no, it shouldn't. So now we have this ruling, and ultimately what it does is I say it infringes the Second Amendment because it does infringe the Second Amendment. I mean, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It means there cannot be a boundary on this thing. You have to forfeit the right to lose it. And the way you forfeit a right in this country traditionally is to commit a crime, be prosecuted for that crime, be convicted of that crime by unanimous jury after having due process and adequate representation. And the crime has to be related in some way to the punishment that you receive, which is the forfeiture of rights. And the most commonly forfeited rights are your property rights in some amount of money, and then your liberty rights in some capacity. Now, it could be your full liberty rights, right? You go to prison for a number of years. It could be a limited liberty right. You have to do a community service, for example, or you're on a probation that is monitored. So you have some restrictions on your life that you wouldn't otherwise have for a period of time. Or you have to do this thing of community service, for example. So those are an infringement of your liberty rights. Well, they're not actually an infringement, though. It's a forfeiture. You say, like, you live under a law, and if the law is violated and you're prosecuted for it, you get due process, then you have given up that liberty for, again, it varies based on the crime. That's how you don't have rights. The Second Amendment is very, very clear. Shall not be infringed. So any infringement under the language of the Second Amendment must logically come from that prosecution, because you would have to forfeit the right. It can't be infringed by government. It says so. And yet it's routinely infringed. It's actually one of the most infringed rights ever. It's weirdly propagandized that it's like not ever infringed. Like, no, the government never restricts guns. They're the easiest thing in the world to get. We all know that's ludicrous. Anyone who's ever bought a gun or tried to, if you think that guns are not the most policed thing in the world, as far as the most policed right ever, here's a task for you. You should definitely do this. Legal advice. I'm telling you 100% to go do this. Obviously, what you do is I want you to take a typewriter and hold it above your head and walk into a courthouse. Just don't say anything. Just walk in with a typewriter above your head. All right. Now we're going to try this exercise. After that, you're going to go home. You're going to put your typewriter down, write down your thoughts and journal about what happened. And then you're going to drive back to the courthouse. And then I want you to grab, I don't know, like an AR-15 and hold it above your head and walk into the courthouse. See which one of those works out for you. They're both rights, right? You have a free press right, a free speech right, which should be represented by a typewriter. And you have the right to keep and bear arms. It shall not be infringed. But one of those two is going to get you tackled. Actually, interestingly, you may not even make it into the courthouse. You may barely make it out of your car walking around with a gun over your head. And it's fantastic that it's one of the most blatantly prescribed actions of government is to infringe on gun rights. Like it's the most, I'll be like, do not mess with this right. This one. The First Amendment is like this 5 rights, and they're like, they've got some balance to them, like, because it's a free exercise of religion, right? That's an actual one that's in tension in the text, because you have the government shall not shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibit the free exercise thereof. So you've got one where government cannot promote religion, but it also cannot unpromote a specific religion. So you have a tension there that goes between these two things. Government has to walk a line. It's right in the text. Fourth Amendment, you have a warrant requirement, but you have a reasonableness thing. It's a messy thing. All of these other amendments, except for the second and the third, are a little bit muddy. Maybe the eighth, cruel and unusual punishment, quartering of soldiers in peacetime, and guns. Very clear on those things. Don't do it. And yet, the one we get the most trouble with, of course, is the second, the most obvious and egregious infringements. And I love it because the government, so here's how they did it. Because they have to convince the Supreme Court, right? They have to convince the Supreme Court that what the government is doing is right. So what they did was they said that crime using ghost guns is on the rise. And how they did that is they compared tracking statistics. So trace requests. If you have a gun that is used in a crime, it has a serial number, right? Like there's a database of the traced transactions, and they do a trace request on the gun through ATF, and it goes to where it was last sold and then everybody before that. And then they at least have a starting point on finding who the last official owner of a gun was. Now it gets complicated because private sales are legal and do not need to have this tracing. They're trying to change that, but traditionally, private sales, person to person, you can do that. Just sell them the gun. And the idea, of course, is the government can go to the last guy who's recorded to own the gun. They can ask him where the hell to go. It's like, well, I sold it to Bill. And they go to Bill and follow it that way. So the number of trace requests on ghost guns has gone up considerably. So that means, of course, that government now you're in more danger than ever, because it went from 1,000 to 19,000. Does that mean that 19,000 more crimes were committed? Not really. Did 19,000 more people die from unserialized guns? Well, no. And by the way, if they did, if that had happened, if there was actually a flood of killings uses unserialized guns, you would know about it. Like they're waiting for that news story. They're already printed. Those news stories are waiting to come out. The first mass shooting involving like a 3D printed AR. I mean, they cannot wait to put that story out. So what you've got, though, is this thing, an increase of a number that increase of a number is sold as danger to society. And that's what the Supreme Court bought into. They bought this argument. And the funny thing is, like, there are other reasons for the increase. There are other simple explanations. Gun creation is getting easier at home. The tools are becoming more and more available. These kits are becoming more and more available. Does that mean that they're leading to more crime? Well, no, not really. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't logically follow that the people who are hobbyists creating guns in their home are going to this system of actually committing crimes, because I don't know how to word this. How do I word this? And this is a common sense thing. This is a frustrating part of it. We all know this intuitively. So people who are hobbyist gun manufacturers, like, I'm going to make myself an AR. This sounds like a cool thing. That's someone investing in a hobby. If you want to go murder someone, you don't like engage in a hobby gun. Like, that's not, it doesn't benefit you in any real capacity. It's not like, well, I did the hobby gun for the purpose of murder. Like, you just go get one. You just get a gun, like, illegally often or legally. It doesn't really matter. Like, you just go get the gun from like a store, because you know what's easier than building your own gun is just like having one that's already made. Right? And it's the same thing we see with like concealed carry licenses and permits to purchase and stuff. Is like the overwhelming majority of people who go ahead and follow through the legal process, like, they're not the ones committing the crime. What ends up happening is someone follows some process, however they acquire their gun, and oftentimes some unrelated event will occur in which they use the gun to commit a crime. I don't know. Maybe they walk in on their spouse cheating on them, for example, or maybe they just lose their cool and they go shoot up a workplace. I don't know what people do, right? Like, I don't fathom killing other people. It's not like in my normal daily thoughts. I have a joke. I'm not going to say it's not my normal daily thoughts to figure out why you would murder someone, but some people do, and it's usually not in their daily thoughts either. That's the beauty of crime is we're all kind of like a bad run of days away from a criminal act of some sort. Um, so it's not really predictable. It's not like, oh, you guy's making a ghost gun. He's probably going to go shoot up a school. Like, well, no, that guy at that point is less likely to shoot up a school than just about anybody, actually. Like, if we're going by statistics, that guy's probably not going to shoot up a school ever. And if he does, probably not with that gun. But yet we allow them to sell this like statistical coincidence as a causative statistic of increased crime when it's not true. And it's frustrating to watch the government lie to the court. And it's even more frustrating to watch the justices just accept the lie, right? Like, that pisses me off that they do it, and they do it all the time. But here we have the Supreme Court just going ahead and infringing on our Second Amendment rights. And they're like, well, it's not a big deal. So the it's important, really. I know this is kind of weirdly tangenting, but to talk about how an injunction is decided. Uh, so an injunction is decided largely on this idea of the balance of harms to the two parties. Okay, so hear me out on this. So what has to happen for an injunction to occur in this or not occur is the court has to weigh out who is more harmed by this injunction occurring or not occurring, right? So the ATF argues that their interest is society's interest. All right. So the idea is that if this injunction occurs, which would be in favor of if the injunction occurs and it's in favor of the citizenry versus the government, right? Because the injunction stops the law. If the injunction happens, the government argues tens of thousands of ghost guns will flood into the market, raising the general danger to everyone. if the Supreme Court doesn't step in. Yes, that is the actual argument for this. And the other people are like, hey, we like make these things and sell them, and we also have rights. So if the injunction doesn't happen, then our business is impacted, and also just our general rights are completely impacted. And the government's argument wins out today at the Supreme Court. He's like, yeah, actually, the government is right. You know, if they don't stop this, then tens of thousands of untraceable guns are going to flood into the market. Like, like, you bought this? You believe that that's a thing that's going to happen? Like, during the time, and remember, this is only during the time of the case. So once the case is fully decided, you know, the law will either go into effect or it won't. I mean, the law is in effect right now. So it's presumably stopping the manufacture of these guns. But that's that's the scenario. It's just it's so baffling to think of this, and to think that there are 5 out of 9 people, right? And they're sitting on a bench and they're listening to this and they're going, yeah, actually, the government's interest in protecting society from these ghost guns is way greater than any individual's right to keep and bear arms. Like that's higher. What they're saying is that it's more likely that a sufficient number of people will die from these guns specifically, because it's only the guns that would theoretically be managed between the time of the injunction and the time of the resolution of the case. That's it. So not only would a gun have to be made in that time, that gun would then have to be used to murder someone for the danger to manifest. And the shocking thing is how unlikely it is for even one death to occur from that. And yet that is a greater risk, according to the Supreme Court, than the infringement of Second Amendment rights for the entire country. Fantastic. Who voted in favor? Well, again, the 3 liberal justices plus Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. So it's great. Let me see. I have. Okay, I have a news story about it. I could pull up, but it's kind of tough to pull stuff up because I'm on one screen here. I normally have 3. My real estate is very, very cramped. Let me actually. I've been ignoring super chats and stuff like that, which I should not do. Let me hit those real quick, and catch up on that, and then we can move it. It is fucking hot here. I got to turn a fan on also. Let me. I'm hoping this fan is not too loud. I turned it off because it was noisy, but Florida is fucking hot. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry about that. Whew. Hopefully, hopefully this isn't too loud. We'll find out. So I've got not at home, so I have to drink a soda because I'm thirsty. I wish I was peeing. No. All right, so let's go ahead and hit these. Oh, and I should, I guess, give a shout out. It is Mandy's birthday today. She's a mod on the channel, so gay, but happy gay birthday to you, Mandy. Devil's Fist says, being this late for your own stream is exactly why I don't sub on locals. Lol. Love you and your show, though. No homo. I mean, I don't know what it has to do with locals, but all right. Again, I was not really planning to be super late tonight. We had dinner reservations at 9:30 Eastern. I figured 2 hours for dinner, and then it's a 40-minute drive. So I figured starting the show at 12:30 Eastern would be feasible. But dinner was 4 hours. So yeah. Lido Enchanted says, finally. Just Joy gifted 5 memberships. Thank you. Camelot says, how's my gate and lay brother? Well, you know how it is. Can't wait to see Camelot, by the way. I head over to Matsuri tomorrow. Well, Matsuri starts on Thursday, but I fly to Houston tomorrow. Is that a little stuffed cat on the shelf? No, it's not stuffed. It's porcelain or ceramic or something. I don't know. Camelot says, I remember when my friend said he didn't want income tax abolished because he relied on his tax return. It's Starcraft SF. Thank you for the donation. There's nothing attached. I also don't have a way to look at Rumble rants today. So I know some were sent. I'm very sorry. I don't have the rant thing on. So any new ones come in and I will send them, or I'll read them right away. But any ones that have already been sent, I can't. Sorry. All right. Anyway, let's get back to the let's get back to this story on the ATF, or should we move to Trump? Hold on, I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to cover on the ATF thing. I don't know. So you go through law school, right? And you have this great idea that I'm going to be a cool lawyer and rights are going to matter and everybody's going to fucking care about them. And you find out really quickly that nobody does. And most importantly, the people who definitely don't are the people who are supposed to the most. They're the ones who are supposed to care the most. The Supreme Court is the one who's supposed to protect your rights, and they just don't fucking do it ever. Well, let's see. Do I have this story? I have this story. Let me pull it up. Trying to do this on one screen is horrifying, by the way. Yeah, for people wondering about why my background is weird, I'm at my parents' house in Florida. Okay, so here we go. Now, can I add this? Yes. Really fucking difficult to do. Here we go. Yes. No, I need more window space, please. Oh my God. Fucking hate StreamYard sometimes. Okay, here we go. How's this work? Oh, it's giant and I'm tiny. Fantastic. Thank you. Let's see if we can fix that a little bit. All right, so here we go. This is the 5-4 vote. Supreme Court revives Biden's regulation of ghost guns. What I was rambling about is it's so fucking frustrating thinking that like you're going to go and protect rights and do this. And you find that people only want to restrict them. And it's not just like whoever you think, everybody. They only want to restrict your rights, and it's always in their interest to fuck with your life. And this goes, there's no like, oh, it's only liberals, oh, it's only conservatives, oh, it's only prosecutors. No, everybody is fine with your life being fucked over for their interest. They love it, actually. The idea that something will negatively affect you to benefit them, perfectly okay with it. They prefer it actually to the alternative, where they have to, work through something or deal with something inconvenient. I mean, that would be hell, wouldn't it? To just have some minor inconvenience in your life when actually what you could do is take away the right of someone else. And it's so goddamn irritating because you have trouble wanting to defend anybody on anything because they're doing the same thing. And you're like, all I want is for everybody to leave me alone. Like all of government, police, everybody, just stay away. I'm not doing anything to harm anybody. Like go over there, like, get unemployed. You're not really useful to me. But no, everybody's like, no, I want the government to step in here and here and here. Why won't someone do something about this? A clarion call of helpless fucking people. All right, so they temporarily revived the Biden administration's regulation of ghost guns, kits that can be bought online and assembled into untraceable homemade firearms. And they love this word, right? Untraceable. Like all serialized guns are put into a database and the transactions are traced. But like they're not actually traced, right? Like it's a database that sits there that only gets access when it's needed. And again, the idea that these guns are causing a rash of crime is way far out in fiction land, but it's untraceable, so that makes them scary. In defending the rule, the key part of President Biden's broader effort to address gun violence Hey, Joe, if you want to address gun violence, why don't you just focus policing where the gun violence is? I know it's very uncomfortable for some people because stats are scary, but there is like a small percentage of people and places, the overwhelming majority of this issue. And if you kind of focus efforts there, like you might find some results. But instead, what you do is you want to restrict people on activities that have nothing to do with this. Like, again, his broader effort to address gun violence, a key part of it is a rule on 80% lowers. Like, that's a key part of it. We can tell right away this plan is a failure because the plan doesn't address the actual issue or where the crime is coming from. But la-di fucking da. Administration officials said such weapons had soared in popularity in recent years, particularly among criminals barred from buying ordinary guns. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, of course. The court's brief order gave no reasons, which is typical when the Justice Act on emergency applications. The order was provisional, leaving the regulation in place while a challenge moves forward in the courts. But it was 5-4, with Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett joining three liberal justice members, Sonia Sotomayor, the dumbest person on the planet, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson to form a majority, which would be great for Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson to eventually be in the minority. This is their one majority. Fucked up the joke. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito Jr., Neil Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh noted dissents. Like the justices in the majority, they did not explain their reasoning. Why, Ken? So the regulation issued in 2022 by Bureau of ATF broadened the Bureau's interpretation of the definition of firearm in the Gun Control Act of 1968. Now, importantly, they didn't actually change the definition of a firearm in the law. There's no change to the law that occurs. They broadened the Bureau's interpretation of the definition because it can't actually change the definition. They have to pass a law. Like, because when you write a statute, a lot of times the first section of the statute is definitions. In this subsection, the following means this. Clearly define things. That exists in the Gun Control Act. It defines what a firearm is. The Bureau can't change that it says what a firearm is. And while not knowing the exact definition off the top of my head, I can tell you that an 80% lower is not in there, not even close. But they just interpret now the definition to mean something that it doesn't. The change, Solicitor General Elizabeth B. Prelogar wrote in the Biden administration's emergency application, was needed to respond to, quote, the urgent public safety and law enforcement crisis posed by the exponential rise of untraceable firearms. It's a crisis. What are you going to do? Not manage it? Not regulate it? Not fix it? Like, the government knows it's a crisis. You got to do it. The new regulation did not ban the sale or possession of kits and components that can be assembled to make guns, she wrote, but it did require manufacturers and sellers to obtain licenses, mark their products with serial numbers, and conduct background checks, which is so easy, right? Why wouldn't you just do a background check like you guys, right? It's just a little bit of a burden, right? Just get a license, just get a serial number, and then just do a background check. No big deal. Gun owners, advocacy groups, and companies that make or distribute kits and components sued to challenge the regulation, saying they were not authorized by the law. They're correct. They're objectively correct. There's no way around this. By the way, there's no world in which the government is right about the law here. And again, that is the most baffling part of this. We have built this system, or well, we had this system built for us, which is remarkably flexible. And it has lasted as long as it has because of this flexibility. It's this idea that we can make laws as necessary, and then we can make sweeping changes to the grander concept of law in the Constitution as necessary as well. It's a little harder to do, but we can do it. So as society grows and populism changes and people decide different things that they want out of their government, as all of that happens, we have the ability to just change the way we govern ourselves in this flexible system. And instead of utilizing that system, we create one that completely ignores it. And they're like, well, the law, it says this. We've understood the definition to be clearly what it says the entire time. But now, I mean, new thing, we've got to change the way we understand it. It's like, well, why don't you just pass a law changing the definition? Well, I mean, we can't really get the vote. Oh, you can't get the votes. So you lack the political will of the governed to change the law to suit your desires. So instead, you're just going to read it different. Like, make no, the only way you get to validate what the ATF is doing, the only possible avenue to it, is to acknowledge that they're going to not follow the law and that they're going to effectively write a new law without writing it. Because the law does not allow this. It's clearly not in there. There's no reading of the law where you can kind of wiggle your way into it. You have to just decide that it includes this thing that it doesn't include. So it's important to note that the government is objectively wrong. They're subjectively wrong. And anyone with any brains knows it. They're just determining if they have the power to pretend that they're not wrong. And that bothers the shit out of me. I would assume and hope it bothers the shit out of everybody else. But I'm routinely surprised by people not caring about this stuff. So who knows? Okay, let's bring this back up. All right. That law defined firearms to include weapons that, quote, may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive and the frame or receiver of any such weapon. Okay. Judge Reed O'Connor of the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Texas sided with the challengers and struck down the regulation in July, saying that a weapon parts kit is not a firearm, and that which may become or may be converted to a functional receiver is not itself a receiver. Correct. Like, if you have an engine and a bunch of metal and some fiberglass and some tires, You don't have a car. Like, you can make it into a car in theory, some know-how and stick-to-itiveness, but it's not a car. If you have a bunch of metal and a forge, you don't have a knife, right? Like, there's a process by which these things happen. And the Gun Control Act didn't regulate the process because, well, it was harder to make guns at home back then. It wasn't impossible, obviously, but it was harder. And it wasn't as popular. But it doesn't matter that that's the reason that they didn't do it. Or actually, no, I take that back. I just assume that that's the reason that they didn't do it. But that's a dumb thing to do. And I'll admit my own dumbness. It is dumb to assume the motives of Congress in putting something in or not putting something in. And importantly, and this is critical to understand, the way the courts interpret a law and the drafting of the law is these laws are drafted, amendments are proposed, changes are made, they go through committee, they get argued over, they get whittled down into this form that they have. And the courts have told us over and over and over that since the process for creating a law and passing it is so robust, we must assume that what is in the law is intended to be in the law, and what is omitted from the law is intended to be omitted from the law. It's not an oversight. It's not like they went, oh, you know what? Dumb of us to fuck that up. Wow, really stupid that we just let that happen, which is bad on us. No, we're supposed to assume that they considered these possibilities and chose not to add them in. And yet, and this is from the Supreme Court. This is how the Supreme Court does statutory interpretation. And yet, we're now told over and over that, like, well, I mean, it just wasn't as popular. It just wasn't available. It just wasn't the same. People could make their own guns in their homes in 1968. Like, again, you couldn't buy 80% lowers, I don't think, for a lot of guns back then. It wasn't as conventionally simple or available, but it's not like you couldn't do it. It's not like the manufacturing process for creating a gun is some unattainable thing. Someone had to do it to start. And so they could have put in that these kits are like some sort of partially completed firearm would be considered a firearm for the definition, yet they chose not to. But it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what they chose because we got a crisis now. Obviously, we don't have a fucking crisis. Hold on. We got a couple super chats that we've got. So Joey Mankey says, who's that hot mama on your wall, bro? That back there? This one? That's it's Marilyn Monroe, dude. That's Marilyn Monroe. That is a painting of Marilyn Monroe on a portion of the Hollywood sign. StarCraft SF says, my bad. My statement was that I learned how you lawyers are experts in wasting time. I was deposed yesterday, and it took 7 hours for a personal damages suit, but it ended with the defendant's attorney getting pissed. That was fun. Yeah, that's how it goes. They're great. Winston Smith says, I gained 70 pounds in law school and bar prep. Now I look worse than Lunchbox. Oh my God. Fix it. Undo that. Undo that. All right, let's get back to this fucking thing. You guys thought that was my mom? I mean, no, it's Marilyn Monroe. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. All right, I need to get my window back up here. Remind me to bring a monitor next time. Okay. He added, even if it is true that such an interpretation creates loopholes that as a policy matter should be avoided, it is not the role of the judiciary to correct them. That is up to Congress. So, first of all, it's not true. The interpretation that exists is just the plain interpretation of the text. So the new interpretation doesn't close a loophole. There isn't a loophole. And This is the language of government, and this is the language of tyranny. The idea that something is not illegal because it's not in the law is not a fucking loophole. It's not a loophole. They do this with taxes all the time, right? Where they're like, oh, yeah, what's a tax loophole? It's like, it's not a tax loophole. It's a deduction. It's a tax deduction. It's in the law that you can deduct this amount from your taxes because they decided that was something that should be. That's not a loophole. That just is. This idea that these 80% lowers are a loophole. No, it's just not illegal. It's not like you found some secret to avoid the law. It's not in the law. It never was in the law. It was never a thing to regulate. Now you want to regulate it. But I hate when judges adopt this shitty interpretation. I hate when politicians say it. I hate when Congress or when newscasters and stuff adopt it and run with it. And they always do for their own interests, of course. But this idea that, this is not a loophole. A loophole would be, I don't even know how you loophole the definition of a fucking firearm. Like they wrote down what was covered by the law. They just wrote it down. Like, how would you get to a loophole in the first place? If they didn't write it down, it's not there. And remember, this is an important distinction that I have to always remind myself of. And you guys might not have to do this, but I do. Laws are not permissive. Okay? Laws are not permissive. Laws do not give you permission to do a thing. Laws are restrictive. Absent a law, you have permission because there is no one who gives you permission to do something. There's no one you have to go ask to do a thing in America. There's a list of things that you cannot do. Very important that list, you don't do those things. But law is always restrictive. So we start to get into this thing about loopholes and this idea that there's some thing where you need to be granted the ability to do something by government. No, absent writing down a restriction, nothing exists to stop you at all. And again, it's the framing of government that has gone on for over a century now. Really started in the early progressive era with Woodrow Wilson and kind of metastasized from there. And it's become this fucking cancer. And you can't get away from people who believe this anymore. You can no longer find people who accept the idea that government should be smaller. You can no longer find people who do not accept the idea that the current level of government is appropriate, unless they think it's not enough. And that's insane to me. It's insane to me to think that you go out on the street and you ask everybody, like, what should the government make a law about tomorrow? What should the government do tomorrow? And everybody will probably have an answer of some law that they want the government to pass or something that they want the government to fix. My answer is, Nick, what do you want the government to do tomorrow? Disband. I'd like that. If they just disbanded, that'd be great. If they could just go ahead and fuck off forever. We could try that one. Well, I don't want to disband. Like, okay, then just shut down these departments. Like, get rid of them. So wait, what? What do you mean shut them down? Yeah, get rid of them. Like, we don't need them to happen. We could just not have that. Well, what would we do without a Department of Education? I don't know. The same thing we do, just without this weird national department. Like, states would just make their own rules in schools. And they just do that. Well, like, how would that work? I don't know. Like, what would we do without the Department of Transportation? Not have a gas tax, I guess? Maybe states would have their own rules on like legal drinking ages and stuff like that. Like we could just do that. Like you could go from one state to another and it might be a different set of rules, but like you could understand them. That'd be fine. Like, but without the Department of Transportation, like who would build the roads? I don't know. Whoever needed a fucking road. Why is this hard? It's so weird. Anyway, it just drives me crazy. Like thinking through the lunacy of how much we demand government to do is All right. I need to switch to Rumble exclusively. We need to get over there. I know the show's weird tonight. I know it's really late, and this kind of has me all thrown off because I normally start, much earlier, and then I get tired as we go. Started off very tired after dinner, but we are going to switch over to Rumble and do some more show over there. But let's finish up the YouTube chats first, and then we'll do that. And again, thank you guys for doing this, bearing with me while I'm on this long trip. It's traveling and streaming is always like a very, very frustrating experience because nothing's ever working perfectly. But thanks for doing that. And again, my schedule tonight was a fucking disaster. But yeah, tomorrow I'm headed to Houston. I am going to try to have a stream tomorrow night. We'll figure that out. And then during Matsuri, there will be some streams. And I have to figure out if I can multi-stream them easily from my phone to both YouTube and Rumble. If not, they may be on YouTube. I don't know. I haven't figured out. I haven't streamed to Rumble from my phone really. So I have to figure that out. The problem is with StreamYard, you can't see the fucking chat on Rumble yet, which is annoying. So we'll try and figure that out. There should be some streaming though happening at Matsuri. And some of it may be done just like while I'm sitting at my table, and I could stream to both very easily because I'll have my computer set up, but we'll figure all that out. That's going to be over the next couple days. And then there'll be some more streams as we go, but I do have travel days in between where I won't be able to stream as much. I'll try and keep everyone apprised of the schedule, but hopefully tomorrow there will be a stream. Ramon says, I don't ever do this, nor have I ever done this, but there is a GoFundMe I would like to promote. It's for my best friend, and she could really use some help. How can I share the link here? Big love. Ramon, not the best stream to do it on, but you got to get the link to like a mod to share it, or to me. It's really hard for me to see stuff right now and share it in general because of the setup that I have, but you absolutely can do that. It's just not I have to get the link because you can't share a link on YouTube. Rick Nikita says, Nikki. Jim Cox says, cheers, folks. Joji says, you should have a one-shot session with Irudi about Darshan's backstory. He did one with Despero about his Dragonborn, and it was well received. Maybe. Hallucinosis says, I've noticed that you're routinely... Oh, wait, we read that one. Hugo Itano says, so Rumble now requires your phone number to chat, so I will no longer be using them. I thought they got rid of that because they had the phone number thing, and then they got rid of it. So I don't know. They started doing that and they weren't before. It's very weird. Kate of the Swiss says, if there's one thing I've learned from life, it's that it's always Steve's fault. That's true. It's always Steve Gosney's fault. Heather Iris says, my dad, Andy, deserves another toast just because. I don't have any liquor here. So cheers to Andy, your dad, and may he have a wonderful time. I don't remember the previous toast. Is he still alive? God, I hope so. Might be one of those awkward ones where he died. And I'm like, yeah, I hope he's doing great. Anyway, a toast to your dad, Heather. Sounds like a good one. If he needs 2 toasts. 2 toasts? I think you need a license for the second toast. Hallucinos says, common sense gun control is when you watch the movie Grease, you decided to ban all tune knives you thought were cool. It makes no sense. Well, yeah. Yes. Yes. All right. We're going to switch over to Rumble. Got a little 20-second music thing. We'll see you over there. The YouTube stream is going to end. Peace out if you do not come over to Rumble. If you do come over to Rumble, I'll love you. I'll see you there. Catch you then, guys. Peace. Peace.
For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Just a second.